What's going on, FutureDDS family? We'd like to take a moment to recognize our sponsors for today's video, DAT Booster. DAT Booster is a DAT prep platform which we've seen help plenty of students improve their scores and actually gain acceptance into dental school. We've done multiple giveaways in the past for this platform, and it's actually come full circle to the point where Nick has actually used the program to improve his scores, and he's actually applying for dental school right now. So I want to give him a moment to explain a little bit about his journey, his process using the program, as well as give us a little bit more feedback about the platform himself.
Yeah, of course. So first of all, I absolutely love DAT Booster. I was studying for the DAT for over a year. So I've seen a lot of question banks, and DAT Booster by far just seemed to be the most up to date. And I'll give you guys an example. When I was taking the biology section on my real DAT, I saw 15 questions word for word from DAT Booster. And I know I wouldn't have been able to get a 30 on the bio section without them. And I ultimately got a 27 academic average. So that's been a huge help in applying to dental schools. I highly recommend them to any pre-dent considering using their program.
So another great thing about DAT Booster is the fact that they understand that you all are actual students, right? They know you have a lot to pay for, being with applications and the actual DAT exam itself. And so what they do is they give you access to their platform to take one free test just to make sure that you like it and it's a good fit for you. Here at FutureDDS, we always preach on preparation, and we believe that the DAT Booster program is great prep for your DAT exam. If you all are interested and want some more information, go ahead and click the link in our description below. Now let's get back to the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Sam and I am a D1 at the New York University College of Dentistry. I grew up in Damascus, Syria, and then I moved here to New Jersey in 2013, so about 9 years ago, going into my sophomore year of high school. And then I continued my education at Montclair State University, also in New Jersey. And I majored in data science. I graduated with a data science degree. However, I switched my major about 3 times in college. I started out as a biology major. I switched to chemistry, then later on switched to biochemistry with a double minor in bio and business. And during that year, I conducted research in bioinformatics, and I absolutely fell in love with the data aspect of the science and the research aspect of it. So I switched my major to data science with a biochem informatics track. So I graduated with a data science degree, and then I took a gap year and I worked as a data analyst for that year before I started dental school. And during my time in undergrad, I was heavily involved in extracurriculars. So I was an admissions ambassador for the undergraduate office. I was an RA for the global education community. I was heavily involved in Greek life, so I was the vice president of my own organization as well as the president of Greek life in general. So I oversaw 43 organizations on our campus, and I did a lot of my leadership growth during my time in Greek life. So I attended a lot of leadership conferences. I also applied for a lot of student coordinator positions in those conferences. So I learned a lot about my skills and understanding, how I lead and how I communicate with others. Other than that, I was also involved in my pre-dental society and the computer science club at my school. A fun fact about me is that I have gone skydiving twice now, one time in San Diego, which was a pretty cool experience. Growing up in Damascus, Syria, I was exposed to healthcare at such a young age. My dad is a dentist and my mom is an ears, nose, throat doctor. So they had their clinic in an underserved community in Damascus, and being exposed to healthcare at such a young age really taught me how to value service, community, and healthcare. So when I moved here, I made a commitment to myself that I wanted to give back to my community, and that's how I really broke out of my shell. I started volunteering at a camp for individuals with special needs, and I absolutely loved working with them and helping them. So going into college, I wanted to start shadowing dentists to see if dentistry is the right field for me, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into medicine or if I wanted to go into dentistry. And when I shadowed dentists, I shadowed 4 of them. I shadowed an endo, I shadowed a general dentist, I shadowed a prosthodontist, and an orthodontist. And during my time at the general dentist, more specifically, I found that I absolutely loved the interactions that I had with those individuals, with the patients. So that interaction aspect of dentistry absolutely made me fall in love with it. I realized that, dentistry is not all about just, you see something wrong with a tooth, a cavity, you just need to fix it. It's more of that there are different aspects of it that you need to combine into this one profession. There's the business aspect of it. There is the, the community aspect of it, the interactions that you build with your patients, the relationships that you build with your patients. And then there is the, the sciences aspect, which I absolutely loved. And then there's also the creative side of it. You have to be able to have a critical thinking, creative thinking of ways that you can approach certain problems or issues. And then there's also the creative side of it, that you have to work with your hand very carefully, very conservatively, in the sense that you want to make sure that you're not taking too much of the tooth, or in restoring a tooth, you really want to make sure that you're doing your most beautiful work. So I think in that sense, it really did combine the 4 things that I'm really interested in and the 4 things that I really had a passion for. As I mentioned before, I took a gap year, and during that gap year is when I studied for my DAT. I'm going to be completely honest with you. During my junior year of college, I decided I wanted to take the DAT by the end of my semester and apply to dental schools that year, so I don't take a gap year. But then when I started studying, I started realizing that I just don't have the time to do that. At the time, I was an RA, I was the president of Greek Life, the vice president of my own organization. I also was taking like 17 credits. It was just not feasible, and I had to sit down with myself and, reevaluate my decision. So first things first is that you need to be real with yourself. Do you genuinely have the time to do it during the semester, or would you like to do it over the summer, or would you like to wait until you take that gap year? I personally waited until I finished all the courses that are needed for the DAT, and then once I did that, I started studying. I realized it wasn't the right time for me, so I decided to wait and take a gap year. And so when I graduated in May of 2020, I started studying, and I studied until August 30th. Of course, with taking breaks in between, because that is very important to recharge. Because when you sit there and you realize that you're actually not retaining information, you're not actually learning, you should stop. Don't burn yourself out. Take a deep breath. And then, do whatever hobbies you have, hang out with your friends, catch up with family, and then go back into studying mode. So as I mentioned, I took a gap year and I worked during that gap year. So I was working as a data analyst full-time from 9 to 5. And what I tried to do is by 5 o'clock, wrap up my work, log off, take an hour break, have dinner with my family, and then from 6 to 11 or even midnight, just absolutely study everything I needed. So personally, I knew that my weaker points were going to be biology and organic chemistry, because I struggled with them in undergrad. So those topics I spent most of my time on, and I used DAT Bootcamp, and that's what I used. I took their schedule and I fit it into my schedule. And so I kind of created a schedule where if there's a chapter that I really struggled with, I would break it down into 2 days. I would rewrite all the notes. I learn much more when I write things, when I draw out the pathways. So that's what I did, and I color coded everything. And that's how I ended up, you know, scoring higher on those two sections than any other section, actually, because I like gave enough time for myself to learn everything. And honestly, my biggest advice is to also meditate. I wasn't a huge fan of meditation or yoga. I took a yoga course in college because I had to take an elective, and yoga just so happened to fit in my schedule and be the easiest. But honestly, I am so grateful I did, because meditation really helped calm me down, calm my test anxiety down, and regulate my sleeping more. So by the time my test was coming up, I was really anxious. I couldn't get a lot of sleep. So what I did was I would take breaks, just meditate for 30 minutes, listen to very calming and soothing music, and then, just try as best as I can to calm myself down, especially getting ready for bed. So those would be like my biggest advices is, one, evaluate yourself if you have the time. Two, treat it like a full-time job and make sure you're dedicating enough time for it. Three, take breaks as much as you can to really make sure that you're not burning yourself out, and hang out with your friends and catch up with family. This is a harder question to answer because you never know what the committee really thought of your application or what set it apart. But personally, what I tried to do is that I tried to go to Adia's Go Dental Days, and I connected with students from each university that I was applying to, just so I could, reach out, send them an email with, a list of questions about their program, their experience, and just, contacting those students and making those connections. And then I also asked a couple of them to be my mentors to help me throughout my application process. So that's kind of what I did, and they helped me out a lot. They, reviewed my essays, they reviewed my application, they reviewed my, like when I was studying for the DAT, they did mock interviews with me also when I was preparing for the interviews, and that was the one way that I really made those connections. And then whenever I made those connections with students and asked them about their experience, what I used to do a lot is that I used to ask them if it would be okay to mention their name in my personal statement or my secondary essay for that school, and tell them that I really connected with this student doctor, and their experience really showed glowing things about the program, and I really enjoyed making that connection with them. And then just talk a little bit about what I learned from that student and how, their education or their experience would really benefit my future goals, for example. And I think that's honestly how I was able to really stand out. And also I did a lot of research on their mission statement and their values. And I incorporated that into my secondary essays to make sure, that my values lined up with their values. I made sure that I brought it up and that I explained how I also value what they see. So for example, for NYU, they value diversity. So I really talked about my upbringing and how diversity is very important to me. And then I also brought up a current event where, NYU stood up for their international students during the time, during COVID, when international students were going to have to leave the country, and NYU really advocated for them. So I really brought in the idea that I personally worked with international students. I was an international student once myself, and I really admired what NYU did during that event. I finished my DAT in August, and I applied to schools, I want to say by the first week of September. I didn't receive any interviews until December and January is when my interviews came in. And I'm going to talk more specifically about my experience with NYU. Their interview day was very relaxed. It was my first interview, and I was so nervous. I remember just being very nervous because I didn't know what to expect. You have worked so hard to that moment, and you're there. You know that you have the right grades, you have the right scores, everything is correct. They just want to see if you are, a good match for their program, if you are the person you claim to be. And I was nervous. I was very nervous. And so my interview day, I interviewed with two people. I interviewed with a faculty member and someone from the admissions office. And both interviews were very conversational. I was like, what, like, was that it? You know? One of the interviewers didn't even ask me why I wanted to go into dentistry, because we were just having such a good and flowing conversation about, you know, building your computer, because I had just built a PC. So he mentioned it briefly, and then we kind of like took off with that conversation. And then we talked about, you know, taking a gap year and me working in data analysis. And so, you know, try to, you know, make those conversations, make those connections with your interviewers, and talk about, you know, if they bring up something about your application, it's because that aspect really interests them, and try to, you know, create a conversation out of it. And then I've also had other interviews where it wasn't really as conversational. It was more, you know, a closed file interview where they didn't have access to any of my files, and they just kind of had to go off of what I was sharing with them at that time. So make sure you're really advocating for yourself during those interviews, and mention the things that you believe really set you apart during or within your personal statement, within your application. Make sure you share those experiences. Other than that, the way I prepped for it is that I contacted my undergrad university, and I asked them if I could do a mock interview with the pre-health committee, and they approved it. I had a mock interview with, it was a panel, so it was 4 people. I was even nervous for that one because it was, you know, some people I didn't even know, but they gave me some great feedback, and that was, you know, one of the ways that I prepared for my interviews. I also looked up each university I was interviewing with, made a list of the questions that are most common to be asked, and then I just drafted an answer. My biggest advice for interviews is don't have an answer memorized and go with it. Try to create more bullet points of keywords that you would like to include in your answer, but not necessarily memorize the answer in a way that you take the authenticity away from that conversation. Just remember, it's a conversation. It's not so much of a robotic answer that they want to hear. So that would be my biggest advice of how to prepare for your interviews. The tips that I would give to prepare for interviews, number 1, research every school. Know what questions you are most common to ask at those interviews, and prepare for them. Now, when I say prepare for them, I don't mean memorize it word for word, memorize your answers word for word. What I mean is that have bullet points of important key events that you want to bring up, or keywords that you want to mention. So I learned this in my public speaking class. You don't want to have everything in front of you, or you don't want to memorize the whole thing, because you're just going to sound robotic, and you're going to take the authenticity away from the conversation that you're having with your interviewer. So what I would say is just draft up an answer, prepare it, and then try to take away a lot of, you know, the filler sentences, and just do key points that you want to bring up. So that's number 1. Number 2, make sure you reach out to your mentors, if you have any, to have a mock interview with you. I did one with my mentor, and he really helped me a lot with what he thought would be very beneficial to bring up during my interviews. And then lastly, reach out to your undergraduate university. Mine has a pre-health committee who actually has mock interviews, or sets up mock interviews with the students who did receive interviews. And mine was a mock interview with 4 people, some of them from, like, you know, the biology department, others from career services, and they absolutely prepared me for and gave me a lot of feedback that I didn't even realize I was doing during the interview, or even like my background, because it was on Zoom, and they told me how to really, stand out in a sense. So those would be my biggest 3 tips for how to prepare for your interview, and just be confident and believe in yourself. You got here, you got so far, you got the interview, they like you on paper, they just want to make sure you're the person you claim to be and that you are approachable. So good luck. I applied to only 6 schools. I only applied to 6 programs because I didn't want to go too far away from home. I also didn't really see myself at a lot of the schools across the country. I really looked into each program. I really looked into the cities, and it was really hard because I'm more of a city person. I really do thrive in city atmospheres much more than like suburban areas for at least my 20s. And so the main reason why I chose NYU over the other schools was because the location. I love New York City. I've always wanted to live here. Even my friends always said, you're gonna end up in the city one day, and I was like, we'll see, but here I am. So that's one of the reasons. Number 2 is it lined up with my professional goals. So personally, I want to end up working in public health in a certain way. More specifically, I want to work with refugee populations in the country and across the world. So I really want to do outreach programs globally during my time in dental school, and then I hopefully want to get my MPH. But what I learned about NYU is that, they have all these outreach programs, whether they were local or even global, our last 2 years. Right now, unfortunately, because of COVID, they are suspended, but they're looking to bring them back as COVID restrictions are, getting easier. And that really just absolutely lined up with my goals, because as I mentioned, I really want to travel abroad and provide healthcare services for underserved communities. And then lastly, just even during my D1, I learned so much about public health. I learned so much about health prevention, health promotion, and interprofessionalism. And what that means is how you look at the patient as a whole, instead of looking at the patient as just, there's like cavities you need to fill. So looking at the overall health of that patient, working with a dietitian to help with their diet, working with a pediatrician if you have a kid, to look into certain things about their health. So I really have been getting a lot of education about, looking at the patient as a whole, and trying to make an impact larger than just within your community, but even, at a state or even as a country level. And that is something I really think I have a passion for. And when I connected with an NYU student, they really emphasized that aspect of it, because I had an interest in it, and those were my career goals. So when I learned all that, I was more attracted to this program than any other program, as well as the fact that right now I'm in the process of, just by enrolling in the same classes as any of my other classmates, I'm in the process of gaining my certificate in public health, which later on hopefully I can graduate, and within a semester, I think, or 2, you could get your MPH. So that's why I really chose NYU over other programs. As I'm sitting here as a D1 answering these questions, I'm also thinking about, the list of things that I have to do and how overwhelming that can be. But honestly, my transition from pre-dental to dental was a lot of overwhelming. To be honest, for me, it was a harder transition because I was going from a full-time employee status to a full-time student once again, and a full-time dental student nevertheless. And during my time, you know, working as a full-time employee, I'm only working from 9 to 5. I would clock out, I'm done with work. However, when I started dental school, over the summer, we would have classes from 10 to 6 p.m. or 10 to 4. And it was very overwhelming because it was a harder transition for me because I was not studying during my gap year. I studied for my DAT, and that was about 10 months before I started school. And so it was a little harder to get back into the groove. And I went through a lot of different study styles. I tried to take notes on my computer, just typing them out, and I realized that didn't work. I tried writing down notes, and that was too time consuming and I didn't like it. And then I discovered that I really need an iPad. And by the end of the summer, I got an iPad, and that it helped me excel in my anatomy courses because I was able to draw a lot of the structures. It helped me in learning a lot of the pathways. And I just realized that I needed, you know, to write things down, to be more organized, and to prioritize my classes depending on what's coming up. You're never going to be caught up in school fully. There are going to be classes that you're not going to understand. At least that's my experience. And during that process, I really realized that I have to be okay with the fact that I'm not going to be caught up fully, because I was so much more in control in undergrad for sure with my classes, but now it's like I have to prioritize which class is coming up, the exam is coming up for, and how I want to break down studying each lecture. I use Anki much more. I didn't even use it for the DAT, but now I use it for a lot of my classes. And you know, as I mentioned before, I draw out all the pathways on my iPad, and during lecture I type out all my notes, and I use OneNote, so it would sync in from my computer into my iPad, and then I could just follow along. And I would rewatch any lecture I need to in order for me to understand the content. So the start of it was very rocky for me, but then as I went along, I understood and learned how best I learn, and that's what I ran with. And now that I'm in clinic and I'm in lab, imposter syndrome is haunting me because, you know, you're learning so much and you're seeing so much and you're like, how am I supposed to be doing this in 2 years? And that's an answer that I'm looking for, hopefully, in the next few years. Our days really fluctuate, they change a lot, throughout the week, not throughout the semester, well, even sometimes throughout the semester, but depending on when classes start and end. Because for example, some of the courses are only a month long, other ones are the whole semester long, other ones, you know, start mid-semester till the end of the semester. So it really varies in that way. But a typical day would be personally, I like to wake up early at 6, go to the gym, work out, then by 8 a.m. I'm in lecture on Zoom or in person, depending on the day, and then I'm in lecture for until either 10 a.m. or noon, and then I'm in clinic from 1 to 5 shadowing once every 2 weeks, and then I'm in bench lab 3 times a week for 2 hours each time. And other than that, I try to fill my schedule with, you know, library hours, or I love to go to coffee shops around here and discover new coffee shops to study. And then I try to wrap up my work by 8, 9 o'clock, wind down with, you know, hanging out with friends or playing video games or just relaxing, and, you know, start it all over again the next day. But it's not as overwhelming if you make sure that you are taking the breaks that you need during the days that you need. The most exciting part of being a student at NYU, honestly, is just being in New York City. We have access to so much, you know. I love exploring the city, finding new spots to, you know, finding new museums, finding new spots to study, finding new spots to relax. I'm also very excited about, you know, the connections that I meet, the people that I meet at school. I know with a large class, it might seem intimidating for some people. I personally thrive in environments like this, and We are broken up into group practices of 28 students that stick out with you for the next 4 years, and it gives us that small experience feel. However, you always have the opportunity to meet new people, whether it was like, you know, D3s, D4s, or even faculty. It just makes me so excited knowing that there's so much experience, so much diversity all around. And every time I meet someone new, I learn so much from them, whether it was with my hand skills or just how to, you know, study for a course, or even just learn the material of the course. It honestly just adds a little more of the surprise aspect to my learning experience, in a sense that not every day looks the same, which helps me, you know, even though I have a routine and I'm trying to stay on track as much as I can, having, you know, our rotation in faculties that teach us the lectures, or even the rotation of the faculties on each row in our bench lab, really helps, you know, keep things a little fresh every time we step into clinic, or every time we step into lab, or every time we go into lecture and learn about something new. My biggest advice to pre-dents, if you are unsure about if this is the right field for you, go shadow dentists and be there, you know, just physically and mentally as much as you can, and see if it's the right fit for you. If you are having, you know, motivational problems with studying, it's because you probably are not ready or to study, or you don't have the time for it. But if you do have the time, but you're just lacking that motivation, find a group to study with. Go on DAT bootcamp, for example. Have them, you know, kind of keep you on track. Find a study group who, you know, has the same timeline as you, and motivate each others to work towards this goal. Join your pre-dental society club and try to make those connections. Another advice, if you are interviewing, you got this far, that means you check off all those things on their list. They just want to see if you would fit in with the rest of the people in their class, or the rest of the people at their university, or if your goals match you know, what they can offer you at their school. And they just want to see if you're an approachable person, because you're always going to be talking to patients and you're going to carry the name of that school. And then lastly, if you have an acceptance, congratulations. Do not study. Try to enjoy as much as you can of the time you have before school to just, you know, go on that trip that you've always wanted to. Go hang out with those friends that you're probably not going to see that often once you're in school. Really take advantage of this time to connect with the people that you might be away from for the next few years, and do the things that you've always wanted to do. Take that trip you've always wanted to take, and have fun, relax. When school starts, you're going to have it figured out. Don't even stress about it. Don't worry about it. And good luck. That's it for everything I have for you today. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for those who are watching. If you want to connect further with me, if you have any questions, if you want to get more of an insight of what it's like to be a dental student at NYU in New York City, feel free to follow me on Instagram at dds.samalsafar. And yeah, other than that, have a great day and good luck on your journey.